The Chairman, Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, protocols observed. First of all, I'd like to say thank you for this opportunity to reflect on the NESG journey. The Chairman has actually kicked it off by acknowledging those that founded the NESG, but I want to add to that we also not just acknowledge them, a lot of those who were part of that whole process have passed on. May their souls rest in peace. Let me also acknowledge in this audience members of my team. I know they are seated somewhere. I haven't seen them. Thank you for coming. Taking on this responsibility of reflecting was a difficult one. Difficult because there's so much to think about. Difficult because of the short time frame that I had to prepare for this speech. Difficult because how do I balance the good with the aspirations that we had without not being grateful for all that we've achieved. I hope by the time I'm done, in the next 30 minutes, I will have done justice to that. Let me also acknowledge His Executive Governor, Lagos State, or the Governor of Lagos State. Thank you for all that you do in Lagos, and thank you for all you do for the larger country. Some may not know what you do, but I think that's actually one of the challenges that we have. We're in a very complex environment, and in that complexity, to actually show results isn't easy. And that's why the balance of what we've achieved and achieving that is really so important. For me personally, because this is a personal story, it's been a long journey. I recall, where was I in 1993? Somebody said it was 10. I was 31. And I happened to work in Arthur Andersen, which is where I caught my first full professional career. I did start in Akintola Williams, but I moved to Arthur Andersen and worked with an incredible set of leaders. Dick Kramer, Dotun Suleiman, Toyin Muniz, Shea Baker-Steth. And I tell leaders today that the greatest gift I believe we can give is to encourage our younger ones. No matter what we are going through, no matter what we hope to achieve, if we don't plant in our younger ones the seeds of what it takes and give them that opportunity to be themselves, it's going to be tough to even have a semblance of hope. And I'd like to acknowledge my former bosses for that. This morning, I'd like to share with you what also gives me hope as I talk about what we have achieved. One of our staff is 24 years old, and I asked his permission to read what I'm about to read to the whole audience, because I feel that no matter what I'm going to say, it's those little acts that we all make in our various spheres that will collectively give us the energy to achieve the accelerated economic vision that the dean of the business school or the dean of the strategy team talked about. And he just sent me a text. I'll be leaving for Ibadan tomorrow morning. My dad had surgery earlier on in the year. And now also with the passing of his dad, I feel it necessary to just go and see how he is, even though I know he is fine. I'll be gone for a week. He lays out what will be done, and he ends with, in my absence, I will make sure nothing is lacking. Why does this give me hope? Before I go to that, let me just reflect on the environment of the 30 years and what has changed and what I'll call are the symbols of economic change. I can tell you, driving from Ikoyi to Ekpe at nearly 2 a.m. this morning, because my flight of 7:25 was delayed, and I left past 12. So that's another story. This mass between Ikoyi and Ekpe has significantly changed. That's not how it was at that time. A lot more economic activity, the whole place is built up. Just imagine that it was all farmland. For those who were 11, those who were not born, it's difficult to imagine. So sometimes when we say, have things changed? Yes, things have changed. And the Lekki story is one example. The other time I came to Lagos, I was to go to Akonwojo to visit. There was an orphanage I needed to visit there, and I was shocked. The roads that had opened up. And I remember in those days, my mom used to have a farm, to supplement her civil service trust, salary. I would go, far into the bush. And believe me, Lekki is just a joke when you think of what has happened in that trajectory. There's the fintech explosion. We didn't have fintechs. We have at least 10, and perhaps counting, women managing directors of major banking institutions. We have Airpeace now flying to United Kingdom. But I must say it was Airpeace that delayed yesterday, or this. So much as we acknowledge that, there's still work to be done. This is my first time of stepping into the Lagos Business School and the Pan-Atlantic University. And I remember in those days, near my family home, I'm a Surulere person. Near my family, all Surulere people. So when we talk about the middle class, here we are. Just down the road, walking distance, there was a place, I think it was called Helms Bridge. And there was this room where the seeds of Lagos Business School started. Dick will come with Dr. Merino and co. Then it was just sitting down in a room and thinking about big dreams. We're sitting now in this hall at an amazing facility, amazing institution that was built by the collective will of a group of people who saw, executed, and have achieved. But more importantly, using the Lagos Business School as an example, there were people also ready to make this vision work. Execution isn't just about having a vision and having the will to make it happen. Being able to attract the right talent, the talent of the same thinking and beliefs, come together, monitoring, executing, and there's a hall in honor of Dr. Felix Ihubiri, there's another hall in honor of so many different personalities. It's the collective will of people across divides, of people across religion, of people across age, that has made the Pan-Atlantic story a success. Can we give them a round of applause? So, we have made progress in a way, but let me contrast this to the people sitting around me yesterday saying they will never fly a piece, but they are stuck here because they have no option. Why delays? Let me contrast it to listening to my brother Frank talk about the fact that the chairman of the board of advisors has said that the private sector today is not as influential as it used to be, and it could be for different reasons. Let me contrast it to going to my village. I talked about Lekki. But you know, and it's a good tradition, by the way, when you lose the older ones and those who insist that they need to be buried back home, even if you have not visited there for a long time, it's a good practice because for those who want to really build Nigeria, for you to go round Nigeria. And my memory of my village when I was growing up, we didn't grow up there. My father grew up there but left for Benin and then Lagos, and then Ilorin and back to Lagos. It was fun. I remember my grandfather. I remember the very thick green forest. And I love the oxygen around the environment. And it stuck with me. I didn't visit that often, but I truly felt home. So when I went back as part of my father's burial ceremonies, we had to visit the village. It was a different story. All the trees gone. The thick vegetation gone. The houses empty. The people you see walking around are either drug addicts who they've been put there because it's easier to manage them there, or very young people playing around, ready to go to the big city. And that tells me, and I remember my mom sometimes will reflect, my late mom, you mean that the president of Nigeria will solve all these problems? It's not possible. And as I contrast this, I say, how do we get this accelerated economic growth? How? Because that's not to say we are not growing. And let me bring up the outcome of my chat with GPT. And when the chairman was asking me how many of these things they are bringing up to the stage do I need, I said everything, because they all had a role to play. So in getting ready for this speech, I said, I don't have that much time. I honestly, and by the way I'm putting out an advert, I still don't have an assistant who will work with me through the hours. There are good people that look at me and say I must be crazy at the sheer amount of work I do. So I'm still searching. But I realized that something that has changed between 1993 and now is ChatGPT, AI. And I started these conversations, you could put it, with ChatGPT, and all the data you can think about. That in 1993, we used to go to libraries, brainstorm, read books, ask for a World Bank journal, everything. I got it in like 30 minutes. So let me give you a sense. But in this sense, and I know I'm running out of time, there's a lot I could cover in this. I know in the Lagos Business School, and I think I've heard it somewhere, there's this methodology that is used maybe in strategy, and that is, where are we? Where do you want to be? How do you get there? It's actually a product of the work we did at Vision 2010. We're trying to look, and I led the technical team for that effort. We're trying to think of a simple way that could help explain the need to strategize, to need to envision, and the need to think through how to do. So I'm going to use this framework to quickly drive, and I'm not going to go into details, don't worry, a reflection on where we are. And I've mentioned some of it from my personal experience, but let me talk about what my chat with ChatGPT came up with. And I asked ChatGPT, my research assistant, give me a chart of Nigerian events, African events, global events against NESG achievements. And I have this whole list between, in fact, 1982 and 2024. So the governor of Lagos beat me by talking about 1993, so I'm not going to go into too much detail. But let me talk about some of the global events around that pre-93, so that you have a sense, and then post. But one thing is clear, in Nigeria, a lot of different, the same things we're facing today, by the way. Economic ups and downs. First of all, 1983. No, let me start with 1982. Economic downturn, beginning with the falling oil prices. Then the coup by General Muhammad Buhari. 1984, Nigeria changes national currency. I'm sure some people don't realize that. Another coup in 1985. Structural adjustment program. And it was around that time you had a lot of JAPA at that time, but not at the same scale as we're having JAPA today. Then we talk about political liberalization, And then around that time, Pan Am Flight 103 bombing, there was a plane called Pan Am. People don't realize that. Fall of the Berlin Wall. Germany used to be divided. Some people don't realize that. Dissolution of the Soviet Union. So in 1991 was when the Soviet Union was dissolved. However, one interesting factor here is when I asked ChatGPT, which are the economic success stories, that have shown, I'll say, real radical transformation change. Some of the outputs of this dissolution were those mentioned. Georgia, Estonia, for example. And what that tells us is that between 1991 and 2024, massive change has actually happened at country level. The states, but for us in Nigeria, we have the creation of new states from 21 to 30, and the list goes on. In fact, in Africa, Nelson Mandela was elected. So we came to birth as the NESG amidst a lot of changes, and the changes continue to this very day. And ChatGPT acknowledges the role of the NESG. Policy advocacy and development, stakeholder engagement, research analysis, and let me quote ChatGPT. Over the 3 decades, from 1993 to 2024, Nigeria's development trajectory has been a complex interplay of economic growth, social changes, and political evolution. True. Because even ChatGPT makes mistakes, but that's true. The NESG's role has been integral in shaping policy direction and fostering a conducive environment for dialogue and reform. And it goes on. So we do need to give kudos to the NESG for providing that platform. And can we please give them a round of applause? But then I continue in my conversation. What more can the NESG do, since we're discussing the future? Enhance political advocacy, education and workforce development, and it goes on. And then I now say, okay, so we need to do all this, but are we where we want to be? Are we where we want to be? And I asked for, give me a comparison of Nigeria to Vietnam, to China, to Saudi Arabia for the years 1993 and 2023, and do it in a tabular format. And I have it. And in here, you can see that a country like Vietnam, as of 1993, had a GDP growth rate of 8.1%. It has dropped to 6.5% in 2023. But more importantly is when you look at GDP per capita, it has moved from $243 to $2,766. In the same vein, Nigeria in 1993 had a GDP of 3.1, 2023, 3.8. So there's been some growth. But an income per capita, GDP per capita has moved from 864 to 2,000. So but let me look at China. And China, if we look at the population, because Vietnam is less than us, so 98 million, so you could say, oh, it's a smaller country. Even Estonia. Estonia is not even as big as Lekki area, let's put it that way. So sometimes we say we can't really compare, but let's look at China. In 1993, GDP growth rate was 13.5%, dropped to 5.7%, but note that as your GDP increases, the rate of reduces even if it is growing. Okay, so let's put that in context. But look at the GDP per capita, $371 in 1993 and $10,200 in 2023. But let me even talk about a story of a Chinese lady I met who came to Nigeria, and she said in her lifetime, she knew when they didn't have power, she knew when they were huddled in little houses, to now where power is everywhere. She said she can see the change at such a radical pace. And that radical pace continues. So when the founders of NESG sat around the table, the vision wasn't just to make step progress. The vision was like a China. And the reason why I added Saudi Arabia to my analysis was because just 1 week ago, a cousin of mine came for his father's funeral. That's an opportunity to meet all your cousins. And I could see he was really bubbly, excited. And I said, where are you based? He said, it's in Saudi Arabia. What are you doing in Saudi Arabia? I said, I'm going to beat Dubai. Haven't you heard of NYOM? Haven't you heard of the one this? Haven't you heard? In fact, as he was speaking, it reminded me of the excitement we had in 1993 and how countries have been transformed to that level of excitement, at that level. And here we are, and I can tell you, much as we have grown. One of the founding members brought this to the hall. This is the first Nigerian Economic Summit. And on the first page, if you read it, you could be reading what we are discussing today. So where does that take us? To be quite honest, I asked GPT, and I said, what do we need to do? And they went on with strong leadership, comprehensive approach, citizen engagement, technology integration. These are things that we talk about. But these are things that we haven't fully executed. And let me end with myself. Like I mentioned, I was part of the Vision 2010 process. When ChatGPT gives examples of countries, they will say they did Vision 2030, they did Vision this. We've done Vision 2010, we've done Vision 2020, we've done Vision 2030, we're also now at Vision 2050. My view and my reflection on where we are is that I don't think we have realized the complexities of our environment. And I say this not just because I worked in the NESD, not just because I've worked in the private sector and in the public sector, not just because I've led my old school association for 4 years, and that has given me very close proximity to the educational system, not just because I've gone to hospitals, but have lived in the hospital for both my parents when they were ill, day in, day out, and observed firsthand the issues in the healthcare sector. A lot of the things we do are unlikely to address the issues on the ground, to achieve the pace. And I'll leave you with one example. Something very simple. Imagine going into a hospital setting and the doctor is saying something. And you know you've had that experience that what the doctor is saying is correct. But there's an argument. No. It's spiritual. And I'm not just saying this flippantly. I am serious. Oh, it's spiritual. In the middle of all this, the person is taken out of hospital. In the middle of this, brought back. In the middle of all this, the doctors are confused. That's not to say that the hospital is perfect. But the intricacies of our belief systems. So when the governor talks about more public engagement, how do we, and that's a challenge for the NESG, build a foundation of like-minded people, not just at the summit level. We got that when we did Vision 2010. Believe me, the process was fantastic. But executing it was different. Again, we've made changes. But that rapid change, if I asked somebody the other day, how will we really make us change? The person said, luck. Say luck. He said, maybe just one accident, and that brings the right people together. I don't want NESG to rely on luck. And I say this because everybody sitting around here, you are listening to me, you are hearing different things. You are hearing different things. The one I said, the one I did not say, the one you think I'm about to say, the one you think is in my head. That is the challenge of the leadership we have. I also remember Felix Ohiwere, when we were, and that, in fact, 2 examples I want to say, and I will end, because I just want to leave this as a challenge. I I remember those days because we broke up the Vision 2010 into 13 groups. And I think Ohiri was the one in charge of corruption. And I remember him saying, if we don't fix corruption, if we don't kill corruption, corruption will kill us. And I'm sure we are still saying the same thing today. And the thing about the corruption that maybe we're discussing then, which is different from the corruption we're discussing now, is that it has permeated every single strand of society. When I tell people I'm shocked that people pay people to do their exams for them, they're looking at me. When I have a meeting with youth couples, they say, Madam, it's normal. So now I see why it's difficult to recruit people. That you have a certificate is not guaranteed that that certificate is yours. That you went to school is not guaranteed that you even entered the school. The educational system is the way it is. And it didn't start today. The healthcare system, we've seen some improvements in people coming, but some people have left this country, want to come back. You know what they talk about? They share hostility in the way the diaspora are treated. So you bring skills, it becomes a talk as to, is it because you are speaking like Oyinbo, so you cannot do? And yet you also understand that people feel hot. They feel they've left them. Nobody is caring for them. But in that care, it's a bit more complex. Because even in some of our traditions, which we have not unearthed, there are certain laws that make not caring accepted. People are still struggling not to be called as people that are forbidden in today's Nigeria. Where do we start? And my challenge to NESG, as we go to the public engagement, and I know this has been talked of in so many different forms, how can we build policy? Not policy that is imposed, but policy that reflects the reality of who we are. An example is the use of technology. Uber just popped into the air to disrupt an environment. Nobody is thinking whether the person that developed Uber is from Edo State or Niger or Germany or whatever. They use it. So how can we recognize that we have all these issues, but lay on top of it something that everyone is galvanized on, and have policy that is not repeated what other people have done, because even those countries that have done well, they've done that recognizing their unique characteristics. We are a complex country. We are divided by age, fact. We are divided by ethnic group, fact. We are divided by religion, fact. Even in the Christianity, we are divided in the Christianity, fact. It's not about changing that and hoping that we'll create a country that doesn't have that. It's about how do we now recognize and not deceive ourselves that we are building a country for some other person, but build a country recognizing all these factors, galvanizing all of us, so that someday when we ask ChatGPT, name the fastest growing breakthrough in this world, guess what ChatGPT says? Nigeria, without a doubt. Thank you.